The bus driver's voice booms across the crowded morning rush. "Move that piece of junk wheelchair. Old man, you're blocking paying customers." The 83-year-old Frank Morrison grips his worn armrest tighter as commuters shuffle past, avoiding eye contact. Nobody notices the small velvet case tucked beneath his lap blanket, or realizes the frail man they're ignoring once carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire in Vietnam. Before we dive into Frank's incredible story, hit that subscribe button if you believe our veterans deserve better treatment. And drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed someone being disrespected in public? Let's honor our heroes together. Now, let me tell you what happened next that changed everything on that bus. Frank Morrison had been taking the same route, 47 bus every Tuesday morning for 3 years. Today felt different. The regular driver, Maria, was sick. Instead, a young man named Derek sat behind the wheel, checking his phone and rolling his eyes at the wheelchair lift. The mechanical whir of the lift always took 2 minutes. Frank knew because he'd timed it countless times, feeling guilty about the delay. But today, Derek made his frustration known to everyone. "Get this thing moving faster," the driver called out. Frank's weathered hands shook as he positioned his wheelchair on the platform. Behind him, a woman in a business suit tapped her heel impatiently. A teenager groaned loudly about being late for school. The lift jerked to a stop inside the bus. Frank tried to maneuver toward the designated wheelchair space, but his old chair caught on something. The wheel wouldn't turn right. Derek threw the bus into park and stood up. His voice carried through the entire bus. "Look, Grandpa, I've got a schedule to keep. These people have jobs to get to. Can't you figure out how to park that thing?" Frank felt his face burn red. 30 other passengers stared at him. Some looked annoyed. Others pulled out their phones, probably hoping for drama to record. A few just looked away, embarrassed for him. "I'm sorry," Frank said quietly. "Just give me a second." Derek walked over, his heavy boots thudding on the bus floor. "The wheelchair space is right there," he said, pointing. "It's not rocket science. Just wheel it in and lock it down." Frank tried again, but his arthritis made it hard to grip the wheels properly. The chair moved forward an inch, then stopped. The brake seemed stuck. Derek grabbed the back of Frank's wheelchair without asking. The sudden jolt made Frank's head snap back. Several passengers gasped. "Hey, be careful," an elderly woman said from the front seat. Derek ignored her. He pushed Frank's chair roughly into position, the metal footrests scraping against the floor. "There," he said. "Was that so hard?" Frank's hands trembled as he tried to engage the wheelchair locks. The left one clicked into place, but the right one wouldn't catch. He'd been meaning to get it fixed for weeks, but the repair shop was expensive. Derek stood over him, arms crossed. "The whole bus can't wait for you to figure out your equipment, old man. Maybe you should think about getting a ride instead of holding up public transportation." A man in a construction uniform shifted uncomfortably in his seat. A mother pulled her young daughter closer. The teenager with the headphones looked up from his phone, sensing the tension. Frank finally got the right lock to catch. "I'm sorry for the trouble," he whispered. Derek returned to his seat, shaking his head. "Some people just don't think about anyone but themselves," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The bus lurched forward. Frank held onto his armrests as they took the first turn. His small velvet case shifted under his blanket, but he quickly steadied it. Nobody could see what was inside, and Frank preferred it that way. At the next stop, 3 more passengers got on. The bus filled up completely. People stood in the aisles, holding onto the handrails. Frank noticed a pregnant woman struggling to keep her balance near the back. "Excuse me," Frank called out softly. "Ma'am, would you like to sit down?" The pregnant woman looked confused. "Where?" she asked. Frank began unlocking his wheelchair brakes. I can move. You need the seat more than I do. Derek's voice cut through the conversation. Don't even think about it, wheelchair guy. You're staying put. I'm not going through that whole packing routine again. Frank felt something break inside his chest. The humiliation was bad enough, but now he couldn't even help someone who needed it. The pregnant woman gave him a sad smile and shook her head. Holding tighter to the rail. The bus hit a pothole. Frank's wheelchair shifted, even with the locks engaged. His blanket slipped, and the small velvet case started to slide toward the floor. Frank lunged forward to catch it, his old reflexes still quick. But the movement made his chair rock, and several passengers jumped back, thinking he might fall. Derek slammed on the brakes. What are you doing back there? He yelled. I can't drive safely if you're going to be moving around. Frank clutched the velvet case to his chest, his heart pounding. I'm sorry, he said. Something just fell. Derek put the bus in park again and walked back. The entire bus fell silent. What's so important that you're willing to risk everyone's safety? He demanded. Frank looked around at all the faces staring at him. Young and old, all watching this spectacle. He thought about lying, about making up some excuse. But something in the pregnant woman's kind eyes made him speak the truth. It's from the war, Frank said quietly. I was just trying to keep it safe. Derek laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. Oh great, another war story. Let me guess, you're some kind of hero, right? Frank's shoulders sagged. He'd never called himself a hero. Not once in 55 years. Heroes were the ones who didn't come home. The construction worker in the front seat started to stand up. Hey, maybe lay off the old guy, he said to Derek. Derek spun around. Mind your own business. I'm trying to run a bus route here, not listen to tall tales from senior citizens. Frank's grip tightened on the velvet case. Inside was his Congressional Medal of Honor, awarded for actions during the Battle of Hamburger Hill in 1969. But he'd never told anyone about it. Not his neighbors, not his doctor, not even the people at the senior center where he played chess. The medal had been locked away in a safety deposit box for decades. Frank only started carrying it after his wife, Rose, died last year. She'd always said he should be proud of it. Now it was all he had left of her belief in him. Derek returned to his seat, muttering about difficult passengers. The bus started moving again, but the mood had changed. People whispered to each other. The pregnant woman kept looking at Frank. With concern. At the next stop, Derek announced they were running 15 minutes behind schedule. As if it's my fault, he said, glancing back at Frank. Frank wished he could disappear. He'd survived machine gun fire, mortar attacks, and watching his friends die in a jungle halfway around the world. But somehow, this public humiliation felt worse than any of that. The bus pulled up to Frank's stop, the medical center where he had his weekly appointments. The wheelchair lift whirred to life, and Derek made no effort to hide his irritation. Finally, Derek muttered. Frank unlocked his brakes and carefully positioned his chair on the lift platform. As it lowered him to the sidewalk, he heard Derek say something to the other passengers about hoping the rest of his route would go smoother. The bus doors closed with a hiss. Frank sat on the sidewalk, feeling smaller than he had in years. People walked past him into the medical center, but nobody looked at him. He was just another old man in a wheelchair, invisible to the world. Frank opened the velvet case in his lap. Inside, nestled in blue satin, was the Medal of Honor, the bronze star gleamed in the morning sun. The ribbon was still bright blue, even after all these years. He thought about that day in Vietnam when he'd earned it. His squad had been pinned down by enemy fire. 3 men were wounded and couldn't move. Frank had crawled through the mud and bullets 6 times, dragging each soldier to safety. The last trip, he'd taken shrapnel in his leg, but he'd kept going. The medal citation talked about extraordinary heroism and selfless service. But Frank had never felt heroic. He'd just done what needed to be done. Just like any other soldier would have done. Now, sitting on this sidewalk, Frank wondered if he'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe he was just a difficult old man making excuses. Frank closed the case and tucked it back under his blanket. He wheeled himself toward the medical center, trying to forget about the bus ride. But Derek's words kept echoing in his head. Some people just don't think about anyone but themselves. Inside the medical center, Frank checked in for his appointment. The receptionist smiled warmly at him. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. Dr. Chun will see you in a few minutes." Frank nodded and wheeled himself to the waiting area. He tried to read a magazine, but his hands were still shaking from the bus incident. The velvet case seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds under his blanket. An hour later, Frank was back at the bus stop. The same Route 47 was scheduled to arrive in 10 minutes. Frank hoped Derek's shift was over. He didn't think he could handle another ride like the morning one. The bus pulled up, and Frank's heart sank. Derek was still driving. Through the windshield, Frank could see the driver's face change when he spotted the wheelchair. Derek opened the door, but didn't start the lift right away. He looked down at Frank with barely concealed annoyance. "You again," he said. Frank nodded quietly. "Just trying to get home," he said. Derek hit the button for the wheelchair lift, but his body language made it clear he wasn't happy about it. The lift descended with its familiar mechanical whir. As Frank positioned his chair on the platform, he noticed something different. The pregnant woman from the morning was back on the bus, still standing in the aisle. She looked exhausted. Frank made a decision. Before the lift reached the bus level, he called out to Derek, "Could you please wait just a moment?" Derek's jaw tightened. "What now?" Frank reached under his blanket and pulled out the velvet case. He'd carried it for a year without ever showing it to anyone. But seeing that pregnant woman standing while he took up the wheelchair space made him feel like he had to do something. He opened the case. The Medal of Honor caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the bus windows. The bronze star gleamed, and the blue ribbon looked almost royal against the worn velvet. Derek's mouth fell open. The entire bus went silent. Passengers in the back stood up to see what was happening. Frank's voice was quiet but steady. "I earned this in Vietnam," he said. "I saved 3 men that day, but I've never been prouder of anything than I am right now. Of asking you to let that pregnant lady sit down." Derek stared at the medal, his face going pale. The Congressional Medal of Honor was unmistakable. Every American knew what it looked like, even if they'd never seen one in person. The construction worker from the morning stepped forward. "Holy cow," he said. "That's the real deal, isn't it?" Frank nodded. "The citation is in here too, if anyone wants to read it." Derek's hand shook as he put the bus in park. "Mr. Morrison, I had no idea. I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." Frank looked around at all the faces on the bus. They looked different now. Not annoyed or impatient. Just amazed. And maybe a little ashamed. The pregnant woman walked to the front of the bus. "Sir," she said to Frank, "I can't take your seat." "You've done enough for all of us." Frank smiled. The first real smile he'd had all day. "Ma'am, I didn't do anything special. I just did my job. But right now, my job is to make sure you're comfortable." Derek got out of his seat. "Mr. Morrison, please let me help you get settled. And ma'am," he said to the pregnant woman, "please take my seat. I'll stand for the rest of the route." As Frank locked his wheelchair in place, he noticed the entire bus had changed. People were talking to each other, smiling, offering their seats to others who needed them more. The teenager with the headphones was helping an elderly man with his groceries. Frank tucked the Medal of Honor back under his blanket. He'd shown it to the world, and the world had responded with kindness. Maybe Rose had been right. Maybe he should be proud of what he'd done. The bus reached Frank's neighborhood. As the lift lowered him to the sidewalk, Derek called out the window. "Mr. Morrison, it's been an honor having you on my bus. I hope you'll ride with us again." Frank waved as the bus pulled away. For the first time in months, he felt like he belonged somewhere. The medal under his blanket wasn't just a piece of metal anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything. That evening, Frank called his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She'd been inviting him for dinner for weeks, but he'd always made excuses. Tonight, he accepted Dot, and for the first time since Rose died, Frank Morrison felt like a hero again.